We've been talking a lot about what's been going on in Ukraine, the peace talks in Riyadh. But let's move over now to Moscow, Russia, where President of the Nigerians in Diaspora Organization, Uwen Sampson, joins us. Uwen, thank you for joining us on the program today. A pleasure having you.
Good evening, and thanks for having me in the program.
I know that, I don't know what the news media in Russia is reporting or how they're reporting recent events, especially with the peace talks going on, the negotiations and attempts at peace talks going on in Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. But what is the impression in Russia about these talks between the US officials and Russian officials regarding Ukraine?
I would say that there's a mixed feelings about this peace talk. Officially, the government is very cautious of what could come out of the peace talks because they speak about the peace talks that were held, which resulted to Minsk I. All these peace talks collapsed, so they are not like. They are actually enthusiastic, and a lot of people want the war to end. We could see it by the results of the that showed in the stock market when President Donald Trump spoke with President Putin. We saw that all these companies went green, and the rubles gained more than 4% in one day, and so it still remains. That shows that. The business society, the people, they want peace. But there are people that are really fighting in the war, and that's the soldiers that are fighting in the war, and they're like thinking that their interests should not be betrayed because a lot of people have fought and many people have died, and they want to see what is called a just peace. But in this case, it is very difficult to find what will be just for everybody because the Russians are looking for the just peace, the Ukrainians are looking for the just peace, and then Europe is trying to find a kind of structure and architecture that will ensure that peace reigns in the continent. But the difference is that what each side calls a just peace is very different from what the other side is thinking.
And this week, Europe, the EU, imposed new sanctions on Russia. I think it's 7th major sanctions on Russia. We've seen this sanctions being imposed in the past. And having spoken to some analysts and some people who live in Russia, there really isn't much of an impact that they seem to make on the economy, is there?
Yes, I will agree with you because even the last package of sanctions, I think that's the 16th, it's not even being felt and nobody's even talking about it. I think the first maybe 5 or 6 package of sanctions was being discussed because the businesses were thinking of how to survive, and anybody that the sanction was had something to do with were very concerned about how to survive inside it. But I think that pretty fast the Russians found a way to survive inside the sanctions environment, and nobody's even talking about the sanctions as something seriously concerning for them as individuals and for them as maybe business or the country. Because if you look at the figures, the preliminary figures for 2024, you will see that the GDP nominal of Russia, as reported by the Prime Minister to the President about a week and a half ago, has grown by 4.1%. Income that's income of the population has grown between 2023 and 2024 by 8.4%. Although the inflation is about, like officially as reported by the central bank, is at about 9.5%, but it is believed that inflation, that's the digits are double actually. So, but generally, everything is available in Russia. Maybe you may not see some of the goods that you used to before, but there's nothing that you need in Russia that you cannot find, and it's really difficult if you're not living close to the areas near the borders with Ukraine. It's really difficult to even understand if you're in Russia that there's a war going on somewhere. But I understand Donald Trump why he wants to stop the war because a lot of people have died, and I think that's a good thing if he will succeed.
Well, there are some who believe that there are other ulterior motives that the U.S. president has towards ending this war. He does have business interests in Russia. Do you think that could possibly be one of the drivers for engaging in and pushing for these peace talks between Russia and Ukraine?
Um, I will not know how much of a business interest President Trump himself will have in Russia, but I think that having seen the war going on for 3 years, in a few days' time, it's going to be, I think in 4 days' time, it's going to be 3 years
Yeah.
that the war has been going on. And nothing significant has changed. The sanctions has not stopped or has not limited the capability of Russia to continue fighting. The sanctions has not stopped the economy from growing because before the sanctions, the Russia struggled to have 1% growth. But inside the sanctions, they now motivated themselves and they're having about 4% growth. So I think Donald Trump definitely, as an American president, as a president of a very powerful, the most powerful nation in the world, he must have a reason why he's doing what he's doing. And I think that the reason is not Ukraine alone. Because if you look back a little bit during the when President Obama was still in office, there were huge differences between the Russians and the Americans. Embassies were closed, assets were seized, and so it has been boiling from there. So I think the Americans and the Russians they have a lot of things to discuss without having a third party in the room. But I think that Ukraine is very very concerned, and they have a reason to be that they feel that the talks that took place in Saudi Arabia was mainly about Ukraine. But the Russians don't feel that it was about Ukraine alone. And even the press briefings that came up after the meetings were held, led by Marco Rubio from the American side and Sergei Lavrov from the Russian side, you could see that a lot of issues were discussed, and they were discussed at the top level. So it will still require a lot of work to go to the details of what needs to be done and how it can be done and who needs to do what. That's
Right.
what kind of concessions who is going to make and whatever is going to happen. This, we have no idea yet.
I wanted to ask you very quickly before I let you go because we're due for a break. This, renewed partnership between Russia and the United States, how are Russians back home reacting to this? What are you gleaning from, the media and, think tanks in Russia, how they're receiving news of these seemingly renewed ties between the two?
It's a kind of what you may call cautious optimism. But in some part of the media, it is regarded as a victory that because the Russians in 2021, December 2021, President Putin sent a letter to the United States and Europe demanding for a discussion on restructuring the security architecture of Europe, and he was denied the opportunity for that to be discussed. So they see it as an opportunity to return back to what was in 2021, and they could start discussion from there. But it's a really mixed feeling. But I will not tell you that someone is like very happy or jumping on the street that this will end, because the Russians know that majority of the weapons that the Ukrainians are using to fight, the intelligence, communication, everything is supplied by the United States, and the United States is giving money to support the budget of Ukraine. So for a player in the game to become a referee in the game for the Russians it's still a question mark.
Pretty interesting analysis there. Mr. Uwen Sampson, President, Nigerians in Diaspora Organization. A real pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. Thank you.